Holy sh**. Hey guys, Davey here with another video game review, and this time I'll be talking about what is probably the most acclaimed and top rated, top reviewed game of the year. Sorry, Bioshock. And that is, of course, The Last of Us. Now don't worry, there are no spoilers in this review. It's going to be a spoiler-free review. I will be doing a spoiler discussion video soon, so stay tuned for that. But for now, feel free to watch. No need to worry. In The Last of Us, a viral outbreak brings the end of the world as we know it, and 20 years later, a man named Joel must smuggle a girl named Ellie out of hostile territory. So for this review, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to go ahead and IGNize this review. I'm going to talk about the presentation first, then the gameplay, and lastly, the multiplayer. And I'm going to start off the presentation with the story. Now right off the bat, I want to start off by saying that the premise of the story is a tad bit familiar, but it remains captivating and grounded. It treats the apocalypse very realistically, with characters interacting with the now apocalypse almost in a very adaptive yet foreign manner. Like there'll be moments where everything's calm and collected and the characters would remain calm and act as if they know what they were doing, but when the shit goes down, they are just as frightened as what is around them as they were when this whole thing broke out. And I love that. It treats it in the way that how characters and humans would react to this sort of thing happening. And in this world, there is a division amongst the remnants of the government known as Hunters and the rebels that try to overthrow them known as Fireflies. And the backstory to these two factions just makes for a very intriguing mythology that they built for this world. And of course, there are the infected. We've had our fair share of zombies. You know, you got the fast zombies, you got the slow zombies. Here, we got what is defined, the true definition of infected. And let me tell you, this is, being a zombie, it's just the beginning. They start off by wanting to eat you and being all fast and all, but man, as these people become more and more infected and they remain with the disease longer, they turn into these hideous, fungus-like creatures that are just nightmares of their own. You will have a nightmare with this in it. Whether it be while you're playing the game or after you play the game or months after you have beaten the game, you will have a nightmare with this in it at some point. But what's kind of funny is that as the story progresses and Ellie gets introduced, it becomes less about the story and more about the characters. Because whereas the premise of the story doesn't really go anywhere, the character development between our two protagonists and the relationship as well as the inclusion of supporting characters does. I mean, these characters are developed so well that the game almost becomes a character study. Combine that with the excellent pace of the story as well as the captivating survival horror elements of the story, and you got yourself a 12 to 14 hour single player campaign that feels like a long but engaging voyage of an experience to have with these characters. I mean, every time I played the game and booted it up and started playing, I felt like I was watching a new episode of The Walking Dead. More specifically, Season 1. You know how Season 1 was probably the most intriguing and just mind-boggling season of The Walking Dead because it was only 6 episodes, but every time, a new episode came on, you wanted to see what happens amidst the outbreak of this zombie apocalypse. I mean, every time I started playing again, it was like, previously on AMC's The Last of Us. My only little nitpicks would be that some of the story elements and the characters are a little familiar. You got your older male protagonist with their secondary younger adolescent protagonist. Yeah, I think we've seen that a few times before. And everybody's talking about how this is a huge tearjerker, 15 minutes in and I'm already shedding man tears. Oh, the feels. I'm gonna be brutally honest, I didn't exactly shed a tear with The Last of Us. That's not to say that I wasn't emotionally invested and touched. No, trust me, I was churned inside. But one or two of those moments in the game, I'm not gonna say they were predictable and I saw them coming, but the fact that people were talking about them on Twitter and Facebook gave me a sense of, okay, that's definitely gonna happen. And pretending that I didn't hear that, pretending that I didn't, see the tweets saying that, 20 minutes in and, The Last of Us is already a tearjerker and that's already Game of the Year. Taking that away and pretending that I never heard it. There's certain things that get introduced that made me go, okay, I'm not sure, but I think that's what's gonna happen, and sure enough, it does happen. So that's just a minor nitpick, but other than that, the story is amazing. And like I said, this happens only maybe once or twice in the entire story. Other than that, the story is realistic, it's captivating, it's engaging, it's authentic, and there are numerous moments where you feel like you're at the edge of your seat, with 1 or 2 moments, at least for me, where I genuinely felt, huh? Did that just happen? Now frankly, where I feel like this game shines even beyond its story is its presentational values. This is probably as close as you're gonna get to a next-gen experience on a current-gen console. I mean, this game is beyond beautiful and mastered expertly in its visual nature. The character models are great, the cinematography is amazing. Naughty Dog incorporated their trademark, camera. Whenever you know how in the Uncharted games, whenever you rotated the camera, the background would get blurred to make it look more cinematic. That is here, and it just makes the experience all the more cinematic. And the artwork and production design is just outstanding. Naughty Dog was very attentive to detail to make this a fully realized experience within a post-apocalyptic world. It is so good that ironically a lifeless world is just filled with life. You have the usual, bombed cities with, large scale cities with huge buildings lopping on top of each other and cars, on their backside, and just, some fire and destruction throughout the streets. But counteracting that are, more small towns and suburban areas that are not exactly all up in flames, but they're ransacked. And again, they're very attentive to detail and to making sure that this is not an exaggerated post-apocalyptic world, but more grounded on reality. Such is the case with all the plant life that is just blooming out of everywhere. Unlike the Walking Dead TV show, that's something that didn't bug me until somebody pointed it out, and ever since then it has bugged the living hell out of me, is that in the Walking Dead show, this has supposed to be the zombie apocalypse just happened, right? Yet the yard in front of the prison is nicely cut. Who did that? And again, little details thrown in here and there to show you the remnants of what used to be a living, breathing world, and just makes you feel more immersed into this environment, and just makes you feel part of this world that has, have gone to hell within the past 20 years. Nothing screams post-apocalyptic world like a fallen freeway sign. And another thing that makes this game feel very next gen is some of the interactivity that happens in the game. At some point, Ellie becomes interactive, meaning every now and then she would come up to you and she would want to talk to you about something that she saw in the background, like an object or like a painting or something. Like I said, a remnant of the old world, as well as, want to talk to you about something that happened within the story. And what Naughty Dog decided to do is to make some of these conversations optional, meaning you press the triangle button and you can talk to her, but if you don't want to talk to her, you don't have to. It's a small detail, but being the fact that these conversations are optional just makes the experience just that much more immersive. Along with that, you also got things here and there like a piano or something that Joel can interact with, and just gives off a great next-gen vibe from the world that The Last of Us has to offer. The sound design in this game is amazing too. I usually don't point out the sound design of the game like, oh my god, it's like breathtaking. But here, that is indeed the case. I mean, the sound that this thing makes is just whenever I would hear it, I would know those things are in the background somewhere, and I'm eventually gonna have to either fight them or sneak past them or sneak up to them. And I was just dreading, like, oh my god, it's these things. Nightmares. Whoever decided to make the sounds for those things, props to you, man. You are gonna give me nightmares, so I'm gonna give you nightmares by making noises. In the musical score by Gustavo Santaolalla, mispronouncing his name, the score for this game is just as amazing. It becomes one with the game and almost a whole another character entirely. It ramps up the intensity and the emotion and the heartfelt moments throughout the game, whether it be from the cutscenes or even the gameplay. And of course, I cannot give my praises enough to the performances in this game. Not voiceovers, performances. These are performances. You got Troy Baker as Joel and Ashley Johnson as Ellie, and Troy Baker as Joel brought a sense of compassion and sympathy for the character, while at the same time making us question him and asking ourselves, why is it that he says the things that he says and why he does the things that he does, especially towards the end of the game. He's almost like the Walter White of the post-apocalyptic world. And Ashley Johnson as Ellie, she kept away from being the typical angsty teenager that she could have easily been. Thank God she's not like that. And she just made you fall in love with her through her humor, through her perspective, and her view of this new world, or lack thereof. And without giving anything away, Nolan North, who plays Nathan Drake in the Uncharted games, has a small but very effective role in this game. And he was amazing. I already beat the game and I'm still thinking about his character. That's how amazing he was. My only nitpicks would be that no game is complete without its bugs. There's literally just 1, 2, maybe 3 bugs and clippings here and there. It's a shame that one of those bugs happened very early in the game during the first 10 minutes. Some character got up from the ground and went like this. This may be me exaggerating a tad bit, but I felt like maybe Ellie was cussing a little too much. I mean, I understand that she's supposed to have this edgy personality and she's gonna have a potty mouth on her based on her background, but every now and then I would be like, did you really have to say that? And like I said before, there's some familiarity with some of these characters. There's a character named Tess early on in the game. She's hardly in the game, but when she was in the game, she reminded me of another character from a television show that also has to do with a zombie apocalypse that I don't particularly like, or anybody does for that matter. Nonetheless, Naughty Dog's production designs has gone up through the roof and has reached AAA status, that of, Rockstar even. Now let's move on to gameplay. The gameplay in this game is the pinnacle of what the past, 1, 2, maybe 3 Resident Evil games should have been. Survival horror. You know what survival horror means? It means limiting your supplies, limiting your ammo, limiting your resources to make the experience of this game all the more intense, all the more engaging and captivating, yet at the same time frightening as hell. Every detail in the gameplay of this game caters to the survival horror genre. That goes from making every piece of supply and ammo scarce to even the details that aren't even there. Like, for example, shooting from the hip. In the Uncharted games, you were able to shoot from the hip, meaning you were able to just run and gun it. You could just press the R1 button and you could just fire the gun without having to aim it. That ability is not here, meaning you precisely have to aim at your enemy or at the infected or whatever it is that you're aiming at and shoot precisely in order to be able to down that enemy. So that throws luck out of the window. You can't rely on luck to defeat your enemy. You have to precisely strategize, not only in terms of whether or not how you should aim at the enemy, but whether or not you should use guns in the first place. Like I said, ammo is very scarce, so obviously you have to strategize and decide, should I take down this enemy stealth wise and sneak up behind them and shove a knife up their head, or should I engage them in actual gunplay and combat? Because when you run out of bullets, your other options are either to just run, you can sneak up to them, you can sneak through them or past them, or you can engage them in melee combat, meaning either blunt weapons such as a baseball bat or a 2x4 or your bare knuckles. That just adds more to the survival horror experience. And both forms of gameplay, whether it be to sneak through, through your enemy or sneak up to them and be able to take them down that way, or engage them in gunplay, just gets harder as the game goes on, obviously. And it becomes more intense, and as rations run out, it becomes scarier. And this game just straight up messes with your head when you have to strategize between spending bullets or sneaking up to your enemy and be stealthy, or just run. Because there is a point during this game where you're gonna have to run. There's this moment in this game where I'm not gonna give too much away, but there's a moment where I had no choice. The consequences that were thrown at me gave me no choice but to just run. And it was the moment in the game where I felt the highest level of adrenaline just rushing right through me, that when I finally made it away from whatever it is that I was running away from, I just couldn't help myself from going and again, this just adds to what a survival horror game should be. Messing with your head and at the same time making you feel like, you're strategizing properly and you're feeling a sense of adrenaline going through you, because that's how intense this game becomes. And honestly, I feel like the only way that you're going to achieve in making a great survival horror game is to input strategy. I think that's the key element that the Resident Evil games started to omit. Because if you don't, mess with your character's head and make them figure out how they're going to get out of this predicament that they're in, then that just takes away from the horror. That just takes away from the suspense that you want to, influence your player and just make the experience that just more engaging and captivating. And I know I'm saying those words a little too often, but it's true. That's how amazing the experience is in this game, and how much it's just an experience that you're never going to have again, and it's probably not going to come around soon. And that is a true definitive survival horror experience. On top of that, you also got a crafting and upgrade system. The crafting system is just like how it sounds. It's a crafting system that helps you build better melee weapons. It helps increase the statistics of your weapons, like your guns, your 9mm or your sniper rifle. And the upgrade system increases the statistics of your character, whether it be their maximum health, or how fast they heal, or how fast they're able to craft items. But due to the apocalyptic nature of the game, these supplies that help you increase your character and your weapons are very scarce. So when you find them, you breathe a sigh of relief, because you go, wow, I finally found this. So now I can equip it to my rifle, I can increase my maximum health, and it helps the game be a little easier, but never too easy for you to just simply breeze on through it and maximize your character to like level 50 like other games do, where you reach level 50 and you're able to beat every single person with just one easy swipe and be all godlike. that is not the case here. And like I said before, within the gameplay, there's some interactivity with Ellie. You can engage conversations with her, and you can also interact with the environment. That just makes the experience all the more immersive. My only complaints about the gameplay would be that none. I thought about it through and through, and I cannot think of anything bad to say about the gameplay in The Last of Us. It's perfect. I'm done. And last but not least, the multiplayer. I'll admit I was one of those people that instantly jumped on the bandwagon of saying, oh my god, they're adding multiplayer to The Last of Us. This is going to feel forced, like, with Tomb Raider, they're going to add, multiplayer that is completely unnecessary, and it's going to take away from the single player experience. Oh, how wrong we were. The multiplayer experience is almost just as intense and as engaging and as riveting as the single player campaign. It has almost all the scary moments and, just like I said, the intense nature of the single player campaign, and it adapts the practically perfect gameplay from the single player campaign onto its multiplayer. Everything from its crafting system to, all the melee weapons that you get to use, all the weapons in general that you get to use in the single player campaign are here. Now granted, there's a progress that you need to make in multiplayer by unlocking certain weapons, certain customization options, the typical fare that you would see in a multiplayer experience. And I don't know about you, but I personally feel like the multiplayer experience serves as a bit of a spin-off to the single player campaign. It takes the two factions that I mentioned about the single player campaign and it explores them and gives them a narrative that it makes it feel like this is going on behind the scenes while Joe and Ellie are off somewhere. And even though said narrative is not a fully realized story like with the single player campaign, it's enough to make you want to keep playing it while you are playing it. Along with that, you also got customization and equipping tools that are just as essential. Now, what Naughty Dog decided to do with their multiplayer this time around is to ground it upon the reality that the single player campaign built itself for. Meaning there's no deathmatch, there's no capture the flag, there's no specific, set of match rules that you have seen in other multiplayer experiences, like for example the Uncharted games. Here you only got two modes: survivors and supply raid, both adapting the survival horror aesthetic of the single player campaign. Now both modes are incredibly similar. I mean, your key objective is to defeat the other enemy's team, depending on the faction that you choose. But the way you go around it is a little bit different, and the differences are significant enough to make the player decide for him or herself which one they prefer over the other. Me personally, I prefer survival raid over survivors, because in survivors, when you die for that round and you don't respawn until the next round begins. Whereas with survival raid, you can respawn after you die, and it isn't until the limited amount of respawns and teammates you have runs out. After winning a match, you gain a new reward such as unlockables, new weapons, boosters, upgrades, stuff like that. The typical stuff that you gain in multiplayer. And along with that, you also progress in the narrative by increasing your number of members in your clan. There's these things called clans, and you have to increase your clan and increase the amount of healthy people as opposed to sick or hungry people in order to progress this narrative. And again, it's this kind of experience that makes you want to keep playing while you are playing it. Now the reason why I say while you are playing it is that one of the things that I fear for the multiplayer is its lasting appeal. I don't necessarily know how long the lasting appeal of this multiplayer is going to have on me. Meaning, I don't know how many times I'm actually going to come back and pop in The Last of Us and say, yes, I want to play multiplayer more and more and more, as much as I was with, say, the Uncharted 2 multiplayer. Because Uncharted 2 multiplayer, I kept coming back to that thing because it was fun as hell. But because of the fact that it's an adventure game, they had, the shooting from the hip mechanic and just all this dynamic, action-oriented experience within their multiplayer. And here's being the fact that it's The Last of Us, a survival horror game, they incorporate some of the elements that they had in the single-player campaign, like sneaking up behind your enemy and strategizing and choosing whether or not to sneak up to enemies or use smoke bombs and engage them in actual gunplay, or to just run and rely on your team members to do the shooting while you equip them with medical kits and stuff like that. So being the fact that it's so engaging while you're actually playing, you get immersed in it. But when I stop playing, how long is it going to take for me to come back to it and be like, yes, I definitely want to keep playing this more and more? That's what I'm afraid of. And the other complaint that I would have about the multiplayer is, again, there's a bit of a tilt. I prefer the supply raid mode over the survivors mode, and I was hoping to prefer both and be able to swap in between each one every time I would play multiplayer, but so far I found myself on the end of playing supply raid the most. And having that tilt towards a particular mode may or may not have an effect on the lasting appeal of the multiplayer experience. Regardless, I have nothing to sing but praise towards Naughty Dog for building a unique and just standalone multiplayer experience that is just as essential and just as engaging as the single player. All nitpicks and complaints and other tiny little whiny things that I've been doing throughout this video, The Last of Us is more than just a game. It is an experience. It's an experience that you probably may or may not want to experience again because it's just so precious and it's going to have an effect on you as a gamer. I mean, your normal life is going to proceed as it is. Don't be afraid of that. But as a gamer, from here on out, you're probably going to play other games and think to yourself, well, The Last of Us did it that way. Oh yeah, that reminds me of The Last of Us. That is definitely going to happen because this game is going to have such an influence on the gaming culture, and it is the kind of experience that you want to give to somebody who doesn't believe that video games are an art form. Give them the game or let them borrow the game, whatever, and have them play it for 20, 30, the first 20 minutes or at least an hour or maybe even hours. And I can almost guarantee you that they'll change their mind and look at every aspect of the game and say to themselves, yes, there is definitely an artistic merit to it, because that's just how much of a rippling effect this game has, because it is more than just, toggling the game and just shooting bad guys. It is a genuine piece of art. And for those of you who have been on the fence of whether or not to buy PlayStation 3, now you have a reason to do so. Now, even though I completely adore this game, some of the nitpicks that I did have with the story do stick with me and keep me from keep giving it that perfect score. And those nitpicks would be that, there's some familiarity with the characters, and some of the things that I was wishing would make me want to cry didn't really make me cry, but it did toggle at my heartstrings nonetheless. So because of that, I will give it a near perfect score and say that The Last of Us is a 9.9 out of 10, which is an A+. So not quite there, but almost. Fuck it. There. It's a 10. I love this game. I adore it. I'm gonna stop talking now. This video has probably gone on longer than it should have been. I'm just gonna say this. Buy the game, buy the game, buy the game. Thank you guys for watching.